The first mistake the Empire made was assuming Earth was still fractured, still lost in its own wars, still too busy killing itself to ever look outward. That assumption would cost them more than lives. It would cost them pride, power, and control. It would cost them the illusion that they were untouchable. Colonel Bennett sat in the hard shell of the Valkyrie dropship, staring across at the other 8 men in his squad. Scarred, silent, brutal, the kind of men Earth stopped naming heroes a long time ago. Nobody looked afraid. They all knew what they were dropping into. A populated Empire world, heavy with tech, air support, and orbital overwatch. A no-win mission. But Earth had given them one job: make them bleed. The Empire had hit Europa first, a clean strike, fast and surgical. No declaration, no warning. 500,000 dead in under an hour. Civilians, scientists, medics. Their excuse? A precautionary sterilization of potential contamination. Earth didn't wait for apologies, didn't beg for peace. They just whispered one name over every secure line on every channel. Sledgehammer Unit. Bennett felt the gravity shift as they broke through the stratosphere. The ride smoothed out for a second before the flak started. The Empire had spotted them. Turrets opened up like fireworks on the surface below, but Valkyries weren't made of the same metal Earth used to build passenger crafts. These were forged for hell. Bennett's earpiece buzzed. 2 minutes, came the voice of command. No extraction, no support. Mission goal remains unchanged. He glanced across the cabin. The men were ready. Not just ready, eager. One of them, Grant, was already grinning. He was the kind who smiled while killing. Every squad had one. Earth didn't send therapists to war anymore. They sent men like Grant. The doors opened mid-air. Wind screamed. Lights flickered red. Go! Bennett barked. One by one, they dropped, free-falling like controlled meteors into a sky painted with laser fire. Bennett hit the ground last, knees crashing into dirt, rifle already drawn. They landed in the middle of a capital city, Arxon 4, one of the core planets in the Empire's third ring. It was meant to be untouchable, fortified, a symbol of peace. That city was burning in less than 15 minutes. Bennett moved like instinct, clearing corridors, stacking bodies, planting charges. They didn't ask who was military. They didn't care. The Empire hadn't asked when they burned Europa. By hour 2, orbital defense was gone. By hour 3, half the planetary command had been executed on live broadcast, Earth's message to the rest of the stars. The footage was seen across 13 systems. One general standing over a dead Empire commander asked, "That was it? That was your elite guard?" The camera panned to the corpses, 30 soldiers lined up like trash. Then it cut to Bennett, still breathing heavy, arms streaked with soot and blood. He looked straight into the lens and said the words that broke the galaxy. That was just Earth's forward unit. They didn't believe it at first. The Empire's High Council dismissed the footage as propaganda, some guerrilla theater by savages from the Sol system. They figured the burning of Arxon 4 was staged, edited, maybe even deep-faked, until the bodies started arriving. Empire warships, returning from patrols, began docking at major ports with cargo holds full of black-sealed coffins. Entire platoons. The official log said ambushed, outnumbered, surprise strike. But when military analysts reviewed the damage reports, it didn't make sense. The Empire didn't get ambushed. They didn't lose 8-1. Not unless someone had turned their own tech against them. Not unless the enemy knew what they were doing. And Earth did. Colonel Bennett stood in what was left of Arxon 4's command tower, looking down at the cratered ruins of the city. Their orders hadn't changed. Cause chaos, draw attention, force the Empire to look Sol dead in the eyes. But he hadn't expected to enjoy it this much. "They're mobilizing," Grant said beside him, holding a cracked data slate pulled from one of the enemy's comm stations. Fleet movement near Varel. 5 cruisers redirected. Looks like they're still underestimating us, sending in a containment force. Bennett snorted. Containment. He looked over at what remained of their unit. 6 men now, 1 dead during the tower breach, another torn apart when the airstrike landed early. But none of them had cracked. None of them even slowed. That was the thing the Empire hadn't learned about Earth yet. Pain didn't stop them. It just pissed them off. They're gonna drop heavy next, Grant muttered. Mechs, orbital railguns, maybe even shock troopers. Good, Bennett replied. We've got something to show them, too. The underground tunnels beneath Arxon 4 were meant to be emergency bunkers for Empire nobility. They were supposed to be off-limits, untouched by war. That's why they never armored them properly. That's why they never expected Earth to reroute an orbital weapon grid through them. It had taken days of silent code breaking and Black Ops hacking, but they'd finally gained access to the defense lattice. Every defense satellite once loyal to the Empire was now under Earth command, and most of the Empire didn't know it yet. Do it, Bennett said. Grant smiled like a wolf before the kill. When the 5 Empire cruisers dropped out of hyperspace above Arxon 4, expecting to bring swift justice to a primitive system, they were met with their own satellite barrage. Lasers meant to melt asteroids cut clean through their shields. 3 ships vaporized within seconds. The remaining 2 scattered, trying to retreat. 1 never made it out. Down on the planet, Bennett watched the streaks of fire slash through the morning sky. A low rumble followed, distant thunder from bodies hitting atmosphere. Pieces of burning metal crashed into the far hills like broken gods falling from space. Send the footage, he said. To who? Everyone. The Empire received the transmission on over 2,000 channels. A single soldier, face blooded, armor cracked, stood over the remains of an enemy cruiser engine. In the background, burning wreckage painted the horizon orange and black. Repeat that line, the cameraman said. The soldier looked into the lens, smirked, and said, You still think we're the primitives? That was just our forward unit. The message was short, but it hit like a nuke. Back on Earth, the leaders didn't celebrate. They didn't broadcast victory or hold speeches. The war wasn't won, not even close. They knew retaliation was coming, and it would be biblical. The kind of fury only an empire could unleash when its pride had been shattered. But Earth had planned for that, too. Bennett stood in the Valkyrie hangar, prepping for the next drop. Grant was already loading charges. 2 new units were inbound. Fresh soldiers, new names, same brutal intent. The first wave had done its job, punch the Empire in the face. Now came Wave 2, break its bones. 3 Empire destroyers tore through orbit above Dren 9, a mining colony turned military outpost after the Arxon 4 incident. Their hulls gleamed with the pride of a civilization that hadn't lost a war in over 7 centuries. From the ground, they looked like gods arriving to set the balance of power right again. Inside those ships, though, no one felt like gods anymore. They'd all seen the Arxon footage. Some tried to dismiss it as war footage exaggerated by fear. Others knew better. A cruiser doesn't just vanish in atmosphere. A forward unit doesn't hijack an entire defense grid. Not unless they've done this before. Not unless Earth had been preparing far longer than anyone thought. And Earth had. Colonel Bennett's boots hit the ground of Dren 9 like hammers on stone. The dropships didn't come silently this time. They came loud. No more hiding. No more recon. Now it was war. Beside him, Sergeant Colby adjusted the targeting node strapped to his wrist and muttered, We're on the Empire's hit list now. You know that, right? Bennett grinned under his helmet. Then let's give 'em a damn good reason to keep us there. The surface of Dren 9 was a wasteland of ash and black soil, the sky above smeared with thick green clouds from decades of industrial abuse. The Empire had turned the colony into a supply core, packed with fuel silos, weapon stockpiles, mech bays. It was the kind of place they thought no one would dare strike. But Earth wasn't just striking it. They were dismantling it from the inside. Before Bennett's team even landed, advance operatives already on the ground had disabled the power grid and rerouted the internal defense drones to recognize Imperial IFF tags as hostile. When the first warning sirens blared, the base guards didn't know who to shoot until the drones opened fire on them. Panic, screaming, chaos. That was Earth's cue. Bennett's unit swept in through the smoke like wraiths, bullet fire short and brutal. These weren't battles, they were executions. The Empire's soldiers fought back, but they weren't used to urban collapse. They weren't used to enemies that enjoyed close quarters. One Empire officer tried to surrender, hands up, crying something in his native dialect about being just a medic. Bennett didn't blink. Europa. That word lived behind his eyes. That excuse died with the rest. By hour 3, the fuel silos were rigged. By hour 5, every mech bay was melted slag. By hour 7, the Empire sent in reinforcements. 2 squadrons of shock troopers wearing exosuits loaded with plasma lancers. They were fast, aggressive, better armed. They were still too slow. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Earth had already buried seismic nukes beneath Dren 9's foundations. Not to destroy it. No, that would be wasteful. These bombs were meant to drop the colony 300 meters into the crust, burying every landing pad, every railgun emplacement, every last inch of Empire tech in a suffocating grave. And when the final countdown hit 0, the planet cracked open like rotten fruit. From orbit, Dren 9 folded inward, collapsing like a dying star. It didn't explode, it sank. A slow, rumbling descent into hell, pulling every Empire soldier with it. Screams cut off as they were swallowed by the planet they once ruled. Bennett and his squad stood on a ledge high above the collapse, the dust cloud rising like judgment. One of the newer recruits whispered, "They're going to send everything after us now." Bennett nodded slowly, then turned to the drone capturing the footage. "Make sure they hear me this time," he said. The feed went live across every open broadcast channel in the Empire. "That was just Earth's forward unit," he repeated. He stepped aside, revealing the smoldering abyss behind him where an entire Imperial base used to stand. "We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to ask permission. You burned Europa. You killed our people. Now you learn what we do to those who strike first." He paused, voice steady, teeth gritted behind the helmet. "This is your war now. We're just getting started." The retaliation came hard and fast, exactly how Earth predicted. Within 6 hours of Dren 9's collapse, the Empire launched an operation they named Crimson Purge. They didn't even hide the name. It was a statement. Fear disguised as dominance. 52 warships, half a dozen capital-class carriers, and 1 dreaded Judicator vessel, the kind of ship whispered about in backroom briefings. Not for its firepower, but for the monster that commanded it. Lord Admiral Verex. A living fossil of the Empire's military might, Verex had built his reputation off brutality. He didn't just win wars, he erased civilizations. Planets that resisted his demands were left silent, their populations glassed to ash. He'd watched Earth from a distance for decades, amused by its infighting, its tribal politics. To him, it was a backwater, a speck of savagery that never learned to kneel. Now he wasn't amused anymore. The fleet arrived on the edge of the Carthus Belt, a no-man's region near the Martian outpost Earth had been rebuilding for over a decade. It was the closest thing to bait Earth ever dangled in front of the Empire, a shiny half-defended shell of a station designed to look vulnerable. It wasn't. Verex sent 3 cruisers ahead to announce our presence, as he said with smug detachment. They never made it to the station. They vanished, completely. No debris, no black box signals, no distress transmissions. Just radio silence and the echo of something big moving behind the asteroid field. Verix called it impossible. No planet-dwelling primitives hide tech like that. He spat to his officers. Earth can't even hold a solar alliance without internal fighting. But Earth had changed. Inside the Martian outpost, beneath its crust, lay Project Reaper, a weapons division so classified only 6 men on Earth even knew it existed. Built in response to the massacre on Europa, Reaper's doctrine was simple. If they come with fleets, we respond with extinction. And now the extinction switch had been flipped. Colonel Bennett wasn't on Mars. He was already prepping for his next infiltration on Ekar Prime. But he watched the orbital feed as Verix's Judicator vessel advanced with confidence, flanked by a sphere formation of Empire gunships. The enemy was efficient. They moved like a machine. So Earth sent a virus. It started with static, then blinking nav systems, then full-on AI disobedience as the entire front line of Verix's formation turned inward and opened fire, on their own. Confusion exploded across the fleet. One Imperial captain screamed over open comms, "Our targeting systems are spoofed! I'm reading friendly as hostile! Stand down! Stand—" And then his signal died in a bloom of plasma. Verix's voice cracked through the frequency a second later. "Who is doing this?" He growled. The answer came in the form of 20 drop pods launched from the asteroid belt, moving faster than the Empire could track. They weren't filled with nukes. They weren't even manned. They were cameras. Each one broadcast a single looping message, a scorched Imperial flag, waving behind the words, "This is just the beginning." Verix, now snarling, ordered full bombardment of the Martian base. It was a foolish move. The base wasn't built to withstand bombardment. It was built to collapse on command. And when the final missile hit, the entire Martian surface folded inward, sending up a cloud of radiation, shattered metal, and red smoke high enough to choke orbit. Verix believed he'd won. He didn't notice the stealth ships that had been tailing his vessel during the chaos. He didn't see the nanomines hitching a ride into his exhaust system. He didn't hear the quiet ping of a foreign signal cracking his ship's firewall. Not until the lights dimmed on the bridge. Not until every screen aboard his command vessel flickered and displayed a face he had seen before. Colonel Bennett, blooded, calm, speaking directly to him. "We don't need peace. We don't want surrender. We want you to feel every loss you made us suffer. And we want you alive. To watch." Verix's face turned pale. He'd mocked Earth for being emotional, for being soft. But it was emotion that fueled this war. Rage, grief, vengeance. Things he'd never understand. And now those things had teeth. The Empire had one sanctuary no outsider dared touch. Elaris, a crystalline planet orbiting a binary star system, it was home to the Throne Archive, the heart of Imperial history, culture, bloodlines. Not a military hub, not a weapons depot, just pride, their legacy, etched into towers of light and data, humming with thousands of years of conquest and self-worship. No outsider had ever set foot on it, not without permission. Earth didn't ask for permission. The decision came down from command in a 3-word directive. Strike the archive. Even Bennett hesitated when he read it. Not because he feared the mission. He didn't even flinch anymore, but because he knew what it would mean. Hitting Elaris wasn't strategy. It wasn't even retaliation. It was a message. Earth was done playing by rules, done aiming for fleets and outposts. Now they were going after what hurt. Sergeant Colby didn't hesitate. He looked over the briefing file and said, "We burn their soul next." Good. The insertion was surgical. Elaris had no planetary defenses beyond ceremonial guard towers. The Empire thought its reputation alone was armor thick enough. Their arrogance was Earth's key. A stealth frigate breached Elaris's outer field and launched a unit of 9. Bennett, Colby, Grant, and 6 other ghosts. No emblems, no flags, just matte black armor and eyes that had seen too much. They touched down in the Crystal Gardens just past midnight Ilaris time. The light from the twin stars refracted off the towers like a dream. It was beautiful, almost holy. Bennett stared for a moment, not out of awe but calculation. They think beauty is invincible, he muttered. Colby nodded. Let's prove them wrong. The archive was a living monument, guarded not by firepower but by lineage. Noble-born soldiers in ornamental gear, raised since birth to protect the Empire's truth. Trained, yes, but trained for show, for ceremony. Bennett's team didn't give them time to show anything. The first guard never saw the knife. The second tried to speak before his throat collapsed. By the time the third rang the silent alarm, the entrance tower was already taken, its override systems purged. Bennett didn't want hostages. He wanted witnesses. Inside the main archive chamber, miles beneath the surface, stood a structure so ancient it pulsed with its own atmosphere. Walls of memory. Vaults containing birth records, genetic purity logs, entire species lineages going back millennia. Earth's ancestors had been erased from these logs, labeled irrelevant. Pre-empirical waste. Bennett stared at one inscription in particular. Species 718-C, Earthborn, Terran, limited neural evolution, emotionally unstable, not fit for integration. Colby saw it too. He spat on the wall. Not fit for integration. That aged well. Then they lit the archive on fire. Not with bombs, with Earth's real weapon, data. They uploaded a virus that didn't just destroy records, it rewrote them, reclassified every Empire bloodline as inbred variants of Terran DNA, erased family crests, corrupted historical timelines, made it look like Earth had founded the Empire. By the time the virus had finished, it appeared that humanity was the source of all imperial greatness. To a civilization obsessed with legacy, it was the worst fate imaginable. The Empire wouldn't just lose their history, they'd lose their identity. Grant stood at the central vault, detonator in hand. "You want to pull it?" he asked. Bennett didn't hesitate. He pressed it. The archive didn't explode. It shattered. Towers collapsed inward like glass under pressure. Crystals groaned and cracked as every shred of preserved history turned to dust. The Empire's pride, burned by the same primitives they'd once called defective. As they exfiltrated, Bennett looked back only once. "We don't need to win every battle," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "We just need to make them lose what they can't rebuild." The Empire bled, but it hadn't died. Not yet. Word of the archive's destruction hit the inner systems like a spiritual death. Entire noble houses collapsed overnight, their histories erased, bloodlines called into question. Civil unrest flared. Some accused their own rulers of faking the attack to rewrite power. Others whispered the truth no one wanted to believe. The Terrans did it. For the first time in its reign, the Empire wasn't feared, it was laughed at. Conquered by ghosts, humiliated by those they'd called inferior. And in the shadows, desperation bloomed like rot. That's when the betrayal came. Earth's command center, stationed on the lunar stronghold outpost Black Ridge, received an encrypted message. A defector. Imperial High Strategist Maro Tellan claiming asylum, offering secrets, fleet routes, fuel depots, vulnerable sectors. He painted himself as a sympathizer, a high-ranking strategist sick of the arrogance, offering Earth a final push toward victory. Bennett didn't like it. "You don't hand over your Empire's throat unless you already cut someone else's," he told command. But desperation has a voice louder than instinct, and Earth had grown bold, maybe too bold. They approved the contact. Bennett was pulled from the front and rerouted to Thorn Delta, a frozen rim station used for low-frequency communications. Secure, cold, and forgotten. That's where the meeting would take place. He landed with a stripped team, just 3 men. Colby, Grant, and a new tech, a quiet kid named Avery who didn't speak unless spoken to. The air was thin on Thorn. Every breath felt borrowed. Inside the comm hub, Maro Tellen waited. He was smaller than Bennett expected. Thin, twitchy eyes, draped in robes of faded rank. "You're Bennett," Maro said. "The ghost, the face behind the fire." Bennett kept his rifle low. "You're the coward who wants to live longer." Maro chuckled. "Not cowardice. Realism. Your people are winning a war they shouldn't even be fighting. You didn't come to compliment us. What's your offer?" Maro handed over a data stick. 33 weak points, hyperlane tunnels that bypass 3 major defense rings. They've guarded them for centuries. No one outside the Imperial family knows. "And you're giving that up because if I don't, someone worse than me will come into power, and they won't fight you. They'll erase you." Bennett stared at the data stick, then at Maro's hand. Something was off. Grant felt it too. He took a step forward. "Why's your pulse hammering?" he asked, eyes scanning Maro's wrist. "You're wired." The realization came half a second too late. The room exploded. Not with fire, with signal. A deep pulse EMP burst from the ceiling grid, shorting every system, every weapon, every suit. Bennett dropped hard, ears ringing. Colby slammed against a wall. Avery didn't move at all. He'd been closest to the source. His helmet visor shattered like glass, his eyes wide and lifeless. Grant pulled a blade. No words. He lunged. But Maro was already running, voice echoing in the dark. "You wanted to fight like ghosts." He laughed. "Now let's see how you die like them." Bennett staggered to his feet, jaw clenched, lungs burning. He didn't need tech. He didn't need drones or uplinks. He just needed vengeance. By the time they got out of the station, Avery was dead. Colby was badly burned, and Grant had a wound across his side that left his armor leaking blood into the snow. Back aboard the evac skiff, Bennett sat in silence, staring at the cracked edge of the data stick Maro had left behind. It wasn't real intel. It was bait, a test to see how far Earth would trust the enemy. They failed that test, but it wouldn't happen again. He wanted to see if we'd believe in peace. Bennett muttered, mostly to himself. "Next time we bring war first." Back at command, the news was worse. In the time they'd wasted on Thorn Delta, the Empire had launched a counterstrike, Operation Halo Sweep. A deep assault on Earth's Colony 9, the last civilian refuge left beyond Mars. 10,000 dead in the first wave. The Empire didn't just retaliate, they struck home. Bennett stood before the command table, fists clenched, eyes dead. "No more messages," he said. "No more broadcasts, no more warnings." He looked up. "We're going to their throne world next." The throne world of the Empire was called Velmora. It wasn't just a capital, it was a shrine to their supremacy. Floating cities, gold-trimmed towers that reached into the clouds, oceans dyed with engineered perfection. Every citizen walked with their chin up and chest out, breathing air purified 1,000 times. The walls were clean because no war had ever touched them. That was about to change. Colonel Bennett stood in the belly of the assault cruiser Unforgiven, flanked by the last soldiers Earth would ever send. Not because there were no more troops, but because this mission wasn't about numbers. It was about impact. Behind him stood men who'd survived Arxon 4 Dren 9, the Alaris archive. Men who'd buried brothers and burned outposts. These weren't rookies. They were the kind of soldiers who stopped fearing death 5 missions ago. They were Earth's final knife. Sergeant Colby, still limping from the betrayal on Thorn Delta, checked his rifle without a word. Grant had stitches running down his ribs, shirt soaked through in dark red, but he didn't slow. Not once. Nobody talked about Avery. They didn't need to. He was coming with them, in every bullet, every scream, every detonation. The plan wasn't subtle. Drop in, cut through the royal line, send a message not even death could silence. Earth's tech division had provided something new for this assault. Skinners. Adaptive armor that mimicked Imperial aesthetics, but carried Terran brutality underneath. Stealthy, silent, and lethal in close quarters. Bennett watched the blue glow of Velmora grow closer on the screen. "We don't hit the palace," he told the team. "We hit the heart beneath it, the sanctum. That's where their emperors are born, crowned and buried. That's what keeps this whole thing breathing." Colby cracked his neck. "Then let's suffocate it." They dropped through cloud cover like shadows, cutting past the patrols with silent gliders rigged to bleed no heat. No alarms, no sonar trace, just pure descent. When they landed on the marble terrace of the sanctum, no one was expecting them. The guards wore ceremonial armor. They died in it. Inside the sanctum, walls of white gold flickered with energy signatures. Statues of dead emperors loomed from every corner. Their faces were carved in stone, stoic, proud, eternal. Bennett fired a round through the face of the most recent one. It shattered across the floor. The first layer of defense collapsed in 4 minutes. The second layer held for 6. And when the third came, Imperial enforcers in full war gear, wielding sonic cannons and grav hammers, Earth didn't slow. Grant was the first into the fray, swinging with a savage roar, dragging 2 soldiers into a pool of flame before a blast took him down. He didn't cry out, just bled into the marble like it was where he belonged. Colby cleared a stairwell, only to catch a shock charge to the spine. He kept firing, didn't scream, just pulled the trigger until the barrel cracked and the enemy stopped moving. By the time Bennett reached the throne door, he was alone. But he wasn't empty. He placed the charges slowly, deliberately. There would be no escape, no retreat. Just a hole torn into the soul of an empire. Before the detonation, he opened his helmet cam. He stared into it, blood soaking the cracks in his brow, one eye nearly swollen shut. "To the Empire," he said. "You took our peace. You killed our children. You poisoned our skies." He held up the detonator. "This is what happens when you think we're too emotional to win." He pressed it. The explosion wasn't fire, it was silence. A gravity bomb crushed the inner sanctum down into itself, folding the very foundation of the palace into a screaming void. The throne room collapsed. The crown chamber turned to dust. The burial crypts imploded, and Bennett went with it. No extraction, no final words. Just a man who took the Empire's spine with him when he died. Velmora never recovered. The blast at the sanctum didn't just kill leaders, it killed myth. For 1,000 years, the Empire had told its people they were untouchable, chosen, superior. But now their throne world was a crater. Their royal bloodline ended by the hand of a Terran ghost no one had even heard of 50 years ago. Colonel Bennett didn't just destroy a city, he shattered faith. Across the galaxy, rebellion sparked like wildfire. Systems that had quietly resented Imperial control started rising. Protests turned into riots. Sectors stopped paying tribute. Enforcer outposts found their gates chained shut and their banners burned in public squares. The Empire still had fleets, yes, guns, soldiers, but they'd lost something they couldn't replace. Fear. And Earth? Earth didn't celebrate. They buried their dead. Quietly. Without parades, no one played victory speeches, no politicians climbed on podiums. The survivors of the forward unit, the last men from Arxen 4, Dren 9, and Elaris, stood in the blackened yard of Outpost Blackridge with rifles across their chests and eyes that had seen too much. Sergeant Colby sat in a chair made of scrap metal, his legs gone, his voice barely a whisper. "We broke them." he muttered. God help us if they ever pull themselves together. But the Empire wouldn't, because when their attempt at retaliation came, it was weak, scattered, panicked. They launched one final fleet toward Earth, led by a puppet admiral desperate to save face. The fleet never made it past Jupiter. It was intercepted by Soul Guard, Earth's new orbital wall, a system-wide net of automated rail platforms and drone storms. Not a single Imperial vessel broke through. Back on Velmora, the Empire's highest-ranking survivors huddled underground, living in bunkers where thrones once stood. They argued about lineage, about whose bloodline still counted, about who could wear the crown now. But outside those bunkers, graffiti stained their shattered walls. That was just Earth's forward unit. And the galaxy remembered. Not the Empire, not the Emperors, the ghosts. 10 years later, a boy named Kellen sat beside his father on the edge of a colony cliff on New Europa, watching a sunset bleed across a clean sky. The wars were over, the rebuilding had begun, but scars still lived in every corner of the stars. His father, once a drone operator during the last push into Velmora, handed him an old data slate. On it, a grainy recording of a man, helmet cracked, eyes fierce, standing before a detonator with death behind him. Kellen stared, wide-eyed. Who was he? His father smiled, just a little. His name was Bennett. He was no king, no god, just a soldier. Did he win? The smile faded into something harder, something earned. Number he didn't win, the man said quietly. He made sure they lost. Kellen nodded slowly, then looked back at the sky. Good,